Yeah, hello. My name is Robert Perkins. You can call me Bob Perkins. I've lived in Hampton Falls all my life, a total of 84 plus years. And I intend to live here the rest of my life and die here, I hope.
Tell us, and again, this is one of those questions that when you rephrase it back to us, the population of Hampton Falls when you were born.
The population of Hampton Falls, when I was born in 1928, I seem to recall it being 491. And I knew, growing up here, I knew most of the residents of Hampton Falls because I had a magazine delivery route and I sold Christmas cards and Christmas seals on my bicycle.
Where did most people live? Where were most of the homes at that point?
Most of the homes were the old homes on Routes 84, which was not 84 then, and Exeter Road, which is now 88. There were a few houses on Drinkwater Road, Mill Lane, and Lafayette Road, but all these new side streets were not in existence.
Tell us about some of the orchards in town. Tell us some about the agriculture in town.
Hampton Falls had two large apple orchards, Elton Orchard and Applecrest, that took up quite a few acres of land, but they were very successful. Most of the residents had their own farms. They maintained a cow or a horse, sometimes more, and sold milk and raised some agriculture. That is.
Back then, what type of businesses operated in town?
Hampton Falls had one store in Hampton Falls when I was growing up. I'll take that back, maybe two stores. There was one near my house that operated for a while on Route 84, and then there was Merrill's store on Lafayette Road. I don't recall any other stores, although occasionally people would open one of their rooms and sell perhaps candy or some personal items.
Did they have any milling operations back then or any industrial types of businesses?
I don't recall that there were any mills operating in Hampton Falls when I was growing up. I think the big flood of 1936 ruined the mill, the Weir's Mill in Hampton Falls, so that knocked it out of production. And the mills at the Hampton Falls were inactive.
So you were 8 years old when the big flood occurred.
Right.
What do you remember about it?
I do not recall anything about the 1936 flood except what my aunt told me, who lived near the pond that the dam produced, and she just said it was a terrible tragedy to see that washed out.
So if you had to talk about the ways that Hampton Falls is different today from what it was when you were growing up, what are the things that really pop out in your mind that are just, when you travel around the town, what pops out at you as being just so different?
Well, Hampton Falls today is so much different from when I was growing up. When I was growing up, even some homes had no electricity, no bathrooms, no running water. Today, that's a rarity if there is a home without those functions. And also, the new roads that have been built in Hampton Falls and the new houses and modern, expensive houses, some worth millions, it's unbelievable.
Are the people different today, the to live in Hampton Falls versus when you were growing up?
The people today, I think, operate similar to what they were when I was growing up. Friendly and happy, and enjoyed living in Hampton Falls, and hoping to maintain some sort of country living. Although Hampton Falls seems to be a suburb of Boston now, but hopefully it will maintain its country-like status.
Is that what you value about Hampton Falls?
Yes, I value about Hampton Falls the fact that there is still a lot of open spaces that hopefully will not be developed. And maybe because of new zoning regulations, maybe they won't be.
Let's go back to when you were a child here. What did you do around town? What were your favorite activities that you did with your friends or your family or your neighbors? What are some of the ways that you spent your time?
Well, growing up, there were not too many children in the neighborhood, but when we did get together occasionally for games and birthday parties. Then later on, as I got a little older, my uncle purchased bicycles for the whole family, and we were on cloud nine. We were able to go around the whole town, visiting people and doing like fishing, rafting, and things, outdoor sports that kids love.
Where was your favorite fishing place?
My favorite fishing place in Hampton Falls was the brook down below my house on Route 84, which is part of the Hampton Falls River. I spent many, many days down there catching shiners. Once in a while, maybe a trout, but rarely.
What's a shiner, Bob?
A shiner is just a small fish that, like a sunfish, that is inedible.
What was your elementary school like?
I went to school here in Hampton Falls. It was then known as the East School, and it was the two-room schoolhouse that has since burned down. We had 3 grades to a room and 1 teacher for each room. And today I can see such big educational changes. The teacher did the music, the art, and all sorts of things. Occasionally, the teacher would ask an older student to supervise another class, maybe to help them be quiet or read something to them. But the teachers had the big responsibility of conducting 3 classes, which I think wasn't easy, but they did it.
Did you feel you received a good education?
I think I received a good education. We got quite a lot of individual attention, even though there were 3 grades, but the classes were small. I only had 6 in my class going through the first 6 grades. And the teachers came to the homes of the parents and the children frequently. I remember teachers coming up for supper occasionally. And in fact, some of the teachers eventually fell in love and married somebody here in Hampton Falls.
Bob, did you participate in the 250th anniversary celebration?
The 250th anniversary was co-chaired by my mother. And she had spent a lot of hours. I remember the hours that she spent and trips she made to get the speakers and the awards and different things for the services. And she did put together a notebook that's in the museum about the celebration. And there were many pictures in that book about what went on.
What was your favorite part of that celebration? What's your favorite memory about it?
Think about that. I guess my favorite part of the whole ceremony was the meetings on the common, we had, seemed like hundreds of people, or thousands of people on the common to participate in the activities. Frog jumping contests, and I can't remember all the others, but it was great.
I think I want you to say that one more time, and just say frog jumping contest, maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure that we captured that.
No.
Just repeat that.
Okay. What I liked best during the 250th anniversary was the participation of the people in the community and some of the events that were held, like the frog jumping contest, some of the sports events, races, and other activity, and food, meals on the common.
I was just going to ask you about the food. Do you remember anything about what the food was? What kind of refreshments they had?
I think the refreshments during the service were mostly hot dogs, hamburgers, and maybe sandwiches and Kool-Aid and punch.
Bob, was there a beverage, though, that they used to drink in the old days that was molasses-based or something? I can't think of the name of it. I had thought that they had recreated that beverage for the 250th.
During the war years and shortly thereafter, but when I say war years, the World War II, most soda was not available. The only one available was Moxie, which tasted terrible to us kids, but that's all we could buy. And today, I believe Moxie has been still being sold. I think it's produced in Maine, maybe. But
It is being sold, and now it tastes like Dr. Pepper.
does it?
They changed the formula, yes.
Tell us about some of your family members that lived here. Tell us about, your relatives, and did you all live in the same area? Did you live in the same home that was passed down to the next to children? And you know what I'm asking you.
I have always lived in the house on Kensington Road in Hampton Falls. This house was purchased by my grandfather in the late 1800s, I believe. And my grandfather lived there, and then my grandmother lived there. She maintained 2 rooms in the house, and when my father got married, he and his wife lived in one half of the house, and that's where the five children, including my brother and 3 sisters, who were raised in that house. The house was originally moved from Kensington at the end of Route 84 in 1897, I believe my aunt told me, and it was moved with the help of oxen. And she said the house ran into difficulty being moved during the winter, so it sat in the field, Nason's field, all winter. And then in the spring they started moving it again. My ancestors, grandfather and great-grandfather on my father's side, and even further back, have always lived in Hampton Falls. My mother's side of the family grew up in Hampton, and she could trace back her ancestry to the original settlers of Hampton.
Bob, do you know why the decision was made to move the house from Kensington to Hampton Falls?
I don't know why the house was moved. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me. You would think they would just build a new house on the foundation, but they decided to move it, and since then, on the old foundation in Kensington, they have built a new house. The house lot that the house sits on now, where I live, was carved out of a farm owned by a purveyor, and it was only a small lot, less than an acre. And when I was growing up, it was surrounded by fields and cultivated fields. And in fact, Mr. Thurlow, who lived next door, ran a farm. He grew vegetables, fruit trees, and raised 7 children through that simple farm that he ran.
Do you live in the house by yourself alone now?
Yes, I still live in the same house by myself, and occasionally pets.
Oh. When you were growing up, were there rivalries between the towns, rivalries between Hampton Falls and Hampton, or Hampton Falls and Kensington?
When I was growing up, there was some rivalry between Hampton and Hampton Falls students. I know when I went to school in Hampton, which was the junior high school, we were looked down upon by the Hampton Falls students as coming from a hick town. But that has changed over the years, and realize that some of the best students now come from Hampton Falls. Seabrook had a bad reputation, and when I say bad, it was, you're called a Seabrooker if you lived in Seabrook, and some of the references weren't too pleasant. But that has changed over the years. Seabrook now is quite a community with all its stores and shops.
Did you go to the ocean when you were a child?
Yes, as a child, I frequently went to swimming down at Hampton Beach. In those days, there were no parking meters at the beach. You could go down and spend the day and do what you wanted to. There were still some stores at the beach because that was a resort, but not as quite as civilized as it is today.
Did you marry Bob, and was your wife
No,
from Hampton?
never married. No.
Oh.
Close, but never married.
So if you could look into the future, what would be your wish looking back on Hampton Falls today? What would you like to see not change? You mentioned open space. You can talk a little bit more about that, or if there's just something special about this town that you'd like to see preserved for the next generation.
For the future, I hope the next generation will be able to enjoy the wide open spaces and the salt marshes that Hampton Falls has. Thankfully, zoning has solved some of the issues, but not all. Over the years, you can see that what's happened to the salt marshes. Growing up, they were still popular by farmers for their hay, and they cut the hay. But through changes over the years, the marshes became wasteland, and nobody wanted them. In fact, they gave them to the town for taxes. My family owned a lot of marshland. We just gave it to the Fish and Game Society to maintain for the public's use. And hopefully, in the future, I hope the marsh will stay open forever and not be filled in.
I have one more question for you that's kind of out of order, but we can edit it back in if this is relevant at all. Do you remember train travel? Do you remember trains?
Yes, the Boston and Maine ran train service from Portsmouth to Boston while I was growing up and while I was working. And what my first job and going to school in Boston, I took the train from Hampton to Boston. In those days, it did not stop at Hampton Falls. The Hampton Falls Depot had been removed, but it did stop at Seabrook and Atlantic Station in Seabrook and Salisbury. And the old steam engine was great. There probably were a dozen trains back and forth between Portsmouth and Boston. And it was sad to see them go away, but thankfully the old train tracks and the site is being used for parkland is being developed for walkways. I know people have used that for bicycling. I go down there and walk on the old railroad beds occasionally myself. I used to take my dog down, and I see other people do the same. And some people go down there and jump off the trestles to go swimming.
I have a question. You were a teenager during World War II.
Right.
Did Hampton Falls do anything special during World War II, or are there any memories that stick out for you?
Well, during World War II, I was still in high school, and we did endure rationing of food and gasoline and coffee, and most everything was rationed. We did have alerts for aircraft, but nothing ever happened. We were forced to pull our shades on the east side of all the houses. No outside lights during the war. We had to paint the top half of the automobile headlights to reduce the glare. And other than that, World War II didn't affect Hampton Falls too much, except that people were called to go into service. And quite a few did go in. I know my sister was engaged to one of the men that was lost his life in the accident in training, and that was hard on the family.
Is there anything else that we haven't asked you about that you'd like to talk about?
You didn't ask about the roads.
Let's talk about the roads.
In Hampton Falls, when I was growing up, most of the roads were tarred, but not all. You know, in order to repave a road or retar a road, trucks would come along and dump sand piles along the edge of the road, spaced evenly along the side, and then the tar truck would come, drop the tar from his truck, and men would come with shovels and take the sand and throw it on the tar to hopefully harden it. And it would take several days for the tar and everything to dry before you could drive safely on it. My mother said...
Hold on a sec, guys. Battery issue down there. Can we start over on that one?
Yeah, we'll start over on that one.
Just that one.
Battery issue.
Did you know, so we're not recording now. When you said something about taking the train to go to school in Boston, was that college or what?
It was the Bentley School. It's now a college, but it was a 2-year school when I went. Yeah.
So was it sort of a business prep school, or?
It was business, accounting.
Well, Bob, you can be the next treasurer for the Historical Society.
No thanks. I'm the treasurer of the scholarship fund and the Grange. And well, not very time-consuming jobs.
It's going great, by the way.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
Bob,
what you're doing.
Fabulous,
He's
fabulous.
just doing a great
You're
job.
the perfect candidate.
You know, I think there's some others. I hope you can get Forrest and Bobby, maybe.
Well, Bobby, I call Bobby Sliva, and you have, is it Bobby Pavir?
Yeah, she's coming later. She's coming in about an hour.
Or Bobby Sliver?
No, Pavir.
Pavir.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I can't understand how you avoided getting married. Good-looking man like you?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
This wasn't in the cards.
perhaps they didn't know me well enough.
Are we all set, Wendy?
Sorry about that. Yep.
Okay,
We're
so we're
good to
going to
go.
start over on
About the roads.
On the roads. You could tell, because that's a great story. And if you could, when you retell that, not that it was perfect the way you said it. The only thing that I would ask that you talk about is, do you remember this as a child, or is this more of a recent?
Okay.
Kind of put it in a time perspective for us. Yeah.
My mother told me when she got married and moved to Hampton Falls from Hampton, the road I lived on was not fully paved. She said that they used to park their car down at the intersection with Mill Lane and have to walk up the rest of the way because the mud was so bad in those roads. This would be in the 1930s, early 1930s. Since then, of course, it's Route 84, Kensington Road, where I live on, is now like a superhighway.
Tell us more about how they would come and the men would come with the sand and actually reclaim a road.
Well, after the truck had poured the tar on the road, the men would come with shovels on both sides of the road and take the sand and distribute it, fling it, so it would cover the whole road, and then it would take several days to dry before you could really drive on it. They did not maintain very good edges to the road, so if you went off the road, sometimes you could be in trouble, but over the years, the roads certainly were greatly improved.
What do you remember about snow plowing or snow removal as a child?
I can recall many big snowstorms we had growing up. As kids, we certainly enjoyed playing in the snow. I do remember the biggest snowstorm that I can remember came in late November. I was still in high school. And it started out as a rainstorm and turned to snow. And the next morning, all the roads in Hampton Falls and around were completely blocked. The ordinary snowplows couldn't take care of it. So we got out the town tractor plow. I don't think it is still in existence. And were able to finally clear some of the roads because the drifts were enormous, and it was several days before some roads were plowed. Today, the roads are plowed every hour, but in those days, the roads are not plowed until the snow stopped falling.
You are wonderful.
Very good.